You've seen the documentary shot. A lion in golden grass, mane catching the light. Utterly unbothered. Nobody watching is thinking about the man walking home through that same grass after dark. The king of the jungle kills more people every year than sharks and wolves combined. That crown has a body count. Here's what the documentary crews leave out. An adult male lion can weigh over 500 pounds and bite down with roughly 650 pounds per square inch, enough to out-crush the most powerful bite of any dog on earth, the English Mastiff, and more than 4 times what a human jaw can generate. He doesn't need speed to close the gap either. A lion can hit 50 miles per hour, nearly twice Usain Bolt's top speed, and by the time you've registered what's moving toward you through the grass, he's already closed it. And he is almost never hunting alone. Here's the part the documentary never explains properly. That final charge you see on camera, the sprint, the leap, the takedown, is the last 4 seconds of a hunt that started 20 minutes earlier, and you never saw any of it. Lions see 6 to 8 times better than you in the dark. Their eyes are built almost entirely around motion and low light, a wall of light-catching rod cells backed by a mirror-like layer that bounces every photon through twice before it's wasted. The empty field you'd need a flashlight to cross is, to a lion, just dim. He can watch you from the tree line at a distance you can't watch him back from, for as long as he wants, before he decides to move. And moving is the last thing he does. A pride hunt is built almost entirely on not being noticed. Lionesses, who do most of the hunting, will stalk to within 10 or 20 meters of a target before committing to a charge, using grass barely tall enough to hide a house cat. They split up without any audible signal, circling wide to opposite sides of the prey, and time the ambush so one lioness flushes the target directly into the jaws of another waiting in absolute stillness. It's not a chase. It's a trap that walks. Teamwork like that pushes hunting success up by roughly a third compared to a lion hunting alone, which is exactly why prides exist in the first place. A solitary lion is a formidable animal. A coordinated pride is a machine with multiple triggers, and by the time you've spotted one lion, the hunt may already be decided by 3 you haven't seen. Then there's the roar. A male lion's roar can be heard up to 5 miles away, the distance from your house to the far edge of downtown. It's not primarily a threat display for you. It's a territorial broadcast, a way of telling every other lion in earshot exactly who controls this ground, and it carries through savanna air with almost no loss of information. Stand close enough to hear one at full volume, and the sound alone can register above 110 decibels, loud enough to feel in your chest before you consciously register it as sound. None of this requires the lion to be unusually aggressive. It requires him to be exactly what millions of years of savanna hunting built him to be: patient, coordinated, and built to close a gap you didn't know was closing. On June 1st, 2015, a 29-year-old American named Katherine Chappell was riding through the Lion Park, a wildlife reserve on the outskirts of Johannesburg, South Africa. She was a visual effects editor. She'd worked on Game of Thrones, on Godzilla, on Captain America. And she was in the country on a volunteer trip, raising money for a wildlife conservation charity. She loved animals. That's part of why she was there. The vehicle stopped near a pride resting close to the road. Chappell rolled her window down to take a photograph. The park's rules are explicit on this point. Windows stay up, always, no exceptions. But from inside a slow-moving car, with a lioness lying calm in the grass less than 4 feet away, the rule can feel like an overreaction. It took less than 2 seconds for that to stop being true. The lioness rose and lunged through the open window. She caught Chappell by the neck. The guide driving the vehicle, a 66-year-old named Pierre Potgieter, threw himself toward the animal and began hitting it, trying to break the hold. A witness in a nearby car, Ben Govinder, watched Potgieter fighting the lioness with his bare hands, punching, shouting, doing everything a human body can do against 400 pounds of muscle that has already committed to a kill. The lioness briefly withdrew. Then she came back for a second attack. Potgieter kept fighting. He would later say it was the most traumatic moment of his life, and reports from the scene describe him suffering a heart attack in the middle of the struggle, still trying to save a woman he'd been driving through the park for less than an hour. It made no difference to the outcome. Chappell's injuries were catastrophic. She died before paramedics could reach her. The lioness was not a wild animal encountered by surprise on some remote plain. She was a 9-year-old female who had lived her entire life within a fenced reserve, accustomed to a slow procession of vehicles passing a few feet from where she rested every single day. Park officials were direct about what that meant afterward. Familiarity with humans in a controlled setting is not the same thing as safety, and an animal born in captivity is still, in every measurable sense, a wild predator running on the same instincts as one born on the savannah. A few inches of open window, 4 seconds, maybe less, was the entire distance between an ordinary safari drive and a fatal one. Chappell's family described her, in a statement afterward, as fearless, someone who had built a career and a life around exactly the kind of curiosity that took her to that park in the first place. It's the same curiosity that puts a hand near the glass, a camera out the window, a few extra inches between you and something that has never needed more than 4 seconds. There's a detail buried inside that nickname, King of the Jungle, that most people never stop to question. Lions don't live in jungles. They never have. With one small population in India's Gir forest as the sole exception, every wild lion on Earth lives in open savanna, grassland, and scrubland, terrain built for exactly the ambush tactics you just heard described. Even that Indian population hunts across dry, scrubby forest, not tropical canopy. Dense rainforest would actually work against a lion. It kills the sightlines a pride needs to coordinate a hunt, and it favors solitary, tree-adapted predators like leopards, not animals that hunt in open, visible teams. So where did the title come from? Historians trace it to old translations of jungle that didn't mean rainforest at all. They meant simply wilderness, any untamed wild land, borrowed loosely from an older word describing rough, uncultivated terrain in general. Somewhere in the retelling, wilderness collapsed into jungle in the modern sense, and the image stuck so thoroughly that most people today picture a lion prowling through dense tropical trees it would never actually be caught anywhere near. That single wrong image says something bigger about how most people understand this animal. If you've absorbed the nickname without ever questioning the geography behind it, what else did you absorb secondhand? From a nature documentary, a logo, a cartoon, without ever checking whether it held up. The lion in the golden grass from the opening of this video is real. The idea of the lion most of us carry around, the one built from nicknames and film reels instead of field data, is not. Here's what the field data actually says, and it's not close to what the nickname implies. A landmark study tracking lion attacks across Tanzania, the country with Africa's largest lion population, documented more than 560 people killed between 1990 and 2004 alone, with attacks increasing sharply over that period, concentrated in rural areas where lions and farming communities share the same unfenced land. Current estimates put the toll across the continent at somewhere between 70 and 250 human deaths a year, depending on the country and the year, with the most commonly cited figure sitting close to 100. Compare that to the animals people are actually taught to fear. Sharks kill, on average, somewhere between 6 and 9 people a year worldwide, a number so small that international media covers nearly every individual case by name. Wolves kill in an average year close to 0. Combined, sharks and wolves account for a rounding error next to what lions do in rural Africa in a single bad season. The reason the fear points the wrong way isn't a mystery. Sharks attack in a setting, open ocean, a swimmer, a surfboard, that's inherently visible and viral. Footage exists, headlines exist. A single incident reaches millions of people in hours. A woman walking to fetch water in rural Tanzania at dusk, in a country where mobile coverage and formal incident reporting are inconsistent at best, generates no footage and, in many documented cases, no official report at all. Researchers studying human-wildlife conflict in the region have noted the same gap for years. For every attack that becomes an international story, an unknown number happen that never leave the village where they occurred. None of this is unsolvable either. Reinforced livestock enclosures, communities call them living walls, concentric rings of chain link woven through acacia thorn, built to replace bomas a lion could once simply slip through, have cut attacks dramatically wherever they've gone up. One 10-year survey around Tarangire National Park recorded just 2 predator break-ins across 62 of these reinforced enclosures, a success rate above 99%. Something as simple as light works too. Solar-powered lights that flash through the night around a livestock pen are enough to disorient a hunting lion, and villages that installed them have reported months without a single loss. A fix that traces back to a Kenyan teenager who noticed the family's cattle were never touched on the nights he walked the fence line with a torch. None of that changes what happens to a person caught in the open, though, away from any fence, at the wrong moment. Deterrents protect livestock and homesteads. They do very little for the woman walking to fetch water at dusk, or the farmer sleeping out in a field to guard a harvest from bush pigs. The very fields the lions are already hunting in. The lion did not become the more dangerous animal recently. It has always been the more dangerous animal. What changed is which one gets the cameras. Here is where the story gets genuinely strange, and where more than a century of research still hasn't produced a clean answer. In 1898, 2 male lions near the Tsavo River in Kenya began killing the workers building a British railway bridge. Colonel John Henry Patterson, the officer eventually sent to stop them, claimed in his own memoir that the pair had killed and eaten 135 people over 9 months before he shot them both. For decades, that number was treated as historical fact, and the case became famous enough to inspire a Hollywood film. Then, starting in the early 2000s, researchers at Chicago's Field Museum, where the 2 lions' remains are preserved, began actually testing the claim. Chemical isotope analysis of the lion's bones and hair, which can reconstruct an animal's diet with real precision, suggested the true number of people consumed was closer to 35, not 135. Patterson, it turns out, may have overstated his own case by nearly 4 times. But the real mystery isn't the death toll, it's the motive, and on that point, the science is still split. One theory, and the most viscerally satisfying, is dental disease. Researchers found that one of the 2 lions had a severely abscessed, broken canine, an injury that would have made hunting the usual prey, animals like buffalo and zebra that fight back hard when caught, agonizingly difficult. Under that theory, the lions turned to human prey not out of aggression, but because it was brutally the easier meal available to an animal in constant pain. A competing theory points to an entirely different cause. That same year, a rinderpest epidemic tore through East Africa and devastated the population of hoofed animals lions normally depend on, potentially collapsing the food supply for every predator in the region at once, tooth damage or not. A third theory is stranger still, that the lions developed a taste for human flesh well before the railway workers arrived, by scavenging bodies left along nearby slave caravan routes for years, and that the railway camp simply gave 2 already conditioned man-eaters an easy, concentrated new supply: dental disease, ecological collapse, prior conditioning through scavenging. Researchers who've spent entire careers on this single case still can't agree on which one explains it, or whether the true answer is some combination of all 3, feeding into each other in ways a chemical analysis, more than a century later, can only partially reconstruct. Modern cases have only muddied the dental theory further. Decades after Tsavo, when researchers studied a separate outbreak of man-eating lions in Tanzania's Rufiji district, they found something inconvenient for a tidy explanation. Many of those lions had perfectly healthy teeth. No abscess, no injury, nothing physically forcing the switch to human prey, just opportunity and a landscape where the usual food had grown scarce. If a broken tooth were the whole story, healthy lions wouldn't need an excuse at all. Something simpler and harder to fix is likely also at work. Strip away enough of a predator's normal prey, and whatever's left standing in the gap becomes the next meal, tooth damage or not. What isn't in dispute is this: 2 lions, acting together, killed dozens of people over 9 months, and the species responsible for that outbreak is the same one currently living in closer daily contact with rural human populations than at any point in the last century. Go back to the image this video opened with. The lion in golden grass, mane catching the light, utterly unbothered. Now you know what's actually sitting behind that stillness. A bite that outcrushes the strongest dog on the planet. A sprint that closes on you faster than Usain Bolt could open the distance. Night vision, built to track you in light, you'd need a flashlight to see through. A pride that hunts as a single coordinated machine, and a roar that can be heard from 5 miles out, telling every other lion nearby exactly whose ground this is. He is not the king of a jungle he has never set foot in. He is the apex predator of open, visible ground. Your ground, if you're anywhere near it, who kills more people in an average year than sharks and wolves manage combined, and who has been doing it quietly enough that the fear never landed on the right animal. The documentary crew got their shot. The lion held still. The light caught his mane, and the segment ended before anyone had to explain what that stillness actually costs. That crown was never just a metaphor.